Cool. Go for it, Scott.
Rightio. Clarke, you put me on the spot. I didn't expect to do this bit. Right, DMR is a digital mobile radio. That's the acronym. Now, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Anyway, so it was originated in. Now you got me on the spot. I think it was 2005 was its origins. Yep. Anyway, it's a 2-channel. And when I say channel, I'm using the term channels by way of TDMA, time division multiplex. That you have 2 channels alternating on a single channel. Hang on, I'm using bad terminology there, but essentially you can have 2 conversations on the one frequency, and they're separated by what's called time slots, and the time slot is simply time slot 1, time slot 2. And if you've ever listened to DMR audio, you'll notice that it just sounds like a rather nasty pulsing sound. That is the TDMA, and each transmission is about 30 milliseconds in length, alternating from time slot 1, time slot 2. So it kind of has that bit of a machine gun effect when you're listening to it. And because of that 30 millisecond swap over, that's what gives you the ability to have 2 conversations on the one channel. Now, it all came about as a way to improve efficiencies on bandwidth for spectrum. Now, that's not overly a big issue here in Australia, but certainly in more densely populated areas, radio spectrum comes at an absolute premium. So there needed to be a way to maximise the amount of conversations that could be heard and or utilised within a single frequency. Now, there are some analogue trunking systems that kind of do a similar thing, but they don't have the ability to run simultaneous conversations at the same time. They are just simply hopping around on set frequencies on a given system. Whereas, because you're using a digital stream, it can all exist on, well, if you're using a repeater, obviously it's 2 frequencies, but it all exists in one stream, and as I said, you can have 2 conversations going simultaneously. So that is the real basics on what DMR is and on how it works. I should have probably put a picture up of what's on the VK-DMR website. That's got a nice little pictorial as to explains the digital, the way that it's split out in context with the time slot 1 and time slot 2. So with that aside, we'll move on to Open GD77 is the name of the firmware, and it's currently in development primarily by Roger Clarke at VK3KYY, and there are a few others involved as well. I can't mention all names because there are already too many for me to remember, but he does credit work from some other users as well from around the globe. And it all came about from the GD77 radio came out with a stock firmware that was very backwards in the way of coming forward, pretty much to say it in a nutshell, in that it required several different layers of programming just to make a single channel work. And for the average user, that's not very practical. You just want to be able to put in what you want to be able to put in and it worked. Well, the GD77 wasn't very user-friendly in that aspect. So some people got together and tried to basically write some code from scratch. It didn't really work that well because the information on the actual hardware that's internal to the GD77, there was no information freely available as to how it all worked, how it all fit together. So essentially it came down to bit banging and reverse engineering of the whole process. And I think it started a good 12 months ago, possibly a little longer, and it's now the code's at a workable point now where the radio will do dual time slot transmissions and also FM as well, so it's still capable of doing FM transmissions and DMR. There are some functions that are still not implemented within the open firmware, but they're on the to-do list, and that's primarily around short message texting from radio to radio, which most users probably would never use anyway. So that's that. I need to share on. Actually, do I need to share that yet? Yeah, yes, I will. There's a share that I need to set up on my screen. When I go into the right box here on my screen, it'll probably work. It's just a screenshot of the GitHub source for where you actually get the initial bit of software that you'll need to put on your PC, which I'm hoping my mouse is visible there. It's called Open GD7 CPS. Now the URL for this we'll have to copy into some show notes or whatever's going to be done after the fact.
Yep. Okay.
Because that's a bit of a mouthful to spurt out. So, and anyway, so Roger Clarke has a GitHub repository, and on it he has the Open GD77 CPS. So I just got distracted with something on the screen there. And under the releases, we have here 14th of the 4th, 2020 is the latest release. Now, on getting that particular file, you come down here and you've got assets. You expand the assets and you've got this Open GD77 CPS installer.exe. That's the primary file you are going to need to download. Once you've downloaded that file, it's just a case of installing it, and then once you've gone through a few hoops of actually installing it, I will note, because the way the program's been set up, and because it's almost like third party, the major players like Microsoft are not very happy with these particular installers, and they may cause false positives on antivirus software detection. So, because who's got the money to pay the Microsoft tax to make it stop doing that? So anyway, once that's installed, how do I switch out of that one? I want to stop sharing that one, and I want to switch into another screen. This is me going live, so bear with me. My notebook is really slow. Okay, let's go do this. Okay, where I want to share the screen, it's not coming up. Okay, this is not handy. I hope I haven't frozen, but I've got an hourglass, so if I crash out, I'll have to rejoin. This is not good. I knew I should test this whilst I was live streaming, prior to live streaming, sorry. I've just got not responding, and I know if I X out of that, it's going to shut down kick me out of the meeting. Let's just get out of that. I've still got an unresponsive Zoom client on this end.
Yeah, you're still okay.
It's still streaming.
Yeah, it's still streaming, Scott.
I'm just unable to share this screen that I want to be able to do. I've just got a totally unresponsive client.
No video.
It's handy, not?
Yeah, your video's frozen though. That's the only thing.
Right.
Your audio's fine, but your video's frozen. So
maybe just turn your video off, Scott, and see if your screen sharing then works, if you can.
I don't actually have any control of the actual current meeting screen. It's gone to non-responsive.
Alright, I'll do it. Yeah, it's not working for me either.
oh well. Do you want him to go out and come back in again?
No, it's come good now.
Oh, there you go. Okay, cool.
I have control again.
Do you want me to disable your video while you're presenting?
can if you want to. You'll just see a lovely picture of my cat.
I see plenty of those on Facebook,
right,
Scott.
I want to go to
I'm on mute.
that. Rightio. So, can we see now a what looks like a radio CPS?
Here. Yes.
Right, okay. So this is the software once it's installed. Now if I'm going too fast, remember that this will be available after the fact, including the glitches. Okay, so once you've got it all installed, you'll want to put your radio programming cable into your USB port of your computer, and you'll want to have your radio switched off and plug the cable into the side of the radio.
This is an MD3.
Once you've done that, you'll then click on
the other one.
Extras.
With the
Come down to the bottom where it says Firmware Loader. Click on that. It'll bring up this screen here, which has got an option for the GD77, the GD77S, the Baofeng 1801, and the Baofeng RD5R. We're obviously wanting the top one. Now, I can simulate this, but it'll fail because I don't have a radio connected. But you would simply then, at this point, you've got to then hold down the blue and black button on the side of the radio in and power the radio on. That's the crucial part that puts it into firmware update mode. Then you click on the download and update. It will remotely go and grab the latest firmware that's available for the GD77. Now you'll notice here it's saying error, I can't talk to a GD77 because I don't have one connected to it. But it would then, this line here would go along green until it reaches the end, and then once it's complete it will tell you that it's been successful and to power cycle on the radio. And once you've done that, you have basically now got the Open GD77 firmware on your GD77.
Mm-hmm.
And with doing that, you now have access to a few extra areas, but I won't really cover the extras. But coming down to the CPS here, you'll notice it looks similar to its original, but there's a few differences. And I've got a code plug that I've already got loaded in this, which will be made available obviously after the fact, and it has got a couple of channels in it. I think that will stretch out. So we've got, I think there's about 20 channels in all, and that's the whole state for FM repeaters, both 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and digital for obviously the DMR, which I think is 5 channels off the top of my head. Now, on the old firmware, under channels here, you used to have to put a channel in for every single talk group that you wanted to use with the GD77, which meant you had a lot more channels than what this is here. This is probably about the most you'd probably want just for the state of Tasmania. And although that sounds daunting, that is actually a lot easier than what it used to be. You can still, if you desire, this is optional, but I still do it. Under the digital contacts, you can still set up your individual talk groups, but it's not mandatory. I've done it so that I can apply the next thing that I'm about to describe, and that is you now have a talk group list. Now this is basically a list that is generated from the digital contacts. So under the DMR Plus here, just bring that up on full screen, we have a list here of 24 talk groups, all in that one talk group group, and that can then be applied to a channel. So you can essentially have all these talk groups all pre-assigned, and you can just assign it to a channel, which I'll show that a little bit later. And it's the same here for the second one. This one's got less in it because this is not the primary network in southern Tassie, so I haven't expanded out on that one too much. So that's talk group lists, and your digital contacts is your talk groups. And channels can be realised, and then the zones. I know I'm rushing through this, but the fact that people will be able to look at it after the fact, they'll be able to pause and have a look. Under zones, this is another fancy word for basically how you want to arrange the channels on a given zone. So for DMR, for example, very basic. I've just got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I put eight. I've
just added one for that.
8 repeaters. Well, actually, it's not 8 repeaters. It's 5 repeaters, 1 simplex, and 2 simplex national calling frequencies in that DMR zone, and that way, with the arrow buttons on the radio, on the left and right arrows, you'll scroll through the talk groups, which are pre-assigned in those talk group lists, and the up and down arrows will cycle through these ones here. So that's how that comes about. And the 2 meter FM is just the 2 meter repeaters, and there may be some there that I've missed, but and then 70 centimeter repeaters. You can have scan groups if you wish. I don't think I did, or did I? Apparently I did. So there are scan lists available. There is also VFO mode. So you can have an A and a B VFO, and that is selectable by the orange button on the top of the radio. It's taking a little bit longer to come up than I expected. Here we go. So the VFO channel is, in this case, I've just got it set for 146,500, and on the VFO B it's just set for 439 megahertz. And that is that. Some of the menu functions that are on this are actually not applicable to the Open GD77 software, because you can still use the stock firmware with this CPS. Its future intention is not to be that way, but at the moment you still can. So where you have buttons, for example, you can totally ignore that, because they are preset in the radio firmware, as opposed to being user selectable like they are in the original firmware. So even though that's saying scan and whatnot, that is not applicable to what the Open GD77 is. So these kind of things are still they're left over from the original code, but going forward they'll be removed, those that are no longer applicable, because it'll get to a point where the Open GD77 firmware will diverge so far from the original firmware that they just won't be compatible any further. They're pretty much already at that point, but that's that. So as I say, this code plug will be available, and the only thing that will need to be edited to get on air is under the General Settings tab. You've got your radio ID, and that is where you put in your DMR number. In my case, I've got 5057074 in this particular box. That is where you just apply your own local number that you have already. If you don't have a DMR number, you can apply for one, and that we can cover at a later stage if need be. So this is the extreme basics on programming the Open GD77. The only thing that really applies is you make your channels, and again the channels are highly basic. If we go into RAD 70 centimeters, which is the digital repeater sitting up at the domain there, once it actually loads on my screen, it will eventually load on yours. I'll move that out of the way. I've got my zoom stuck out in the way there. Right, we've got a digital allocation for that's what mode we want the channel to be, a description of what you want the channel to be called. This can be absolutely anything. It's just what I've called it. You'll have your receive frequency, and your transmit frequency. This normal does not apply for Open GD77. The squelch level is set here in this one here, and it's a drop-down menu selectable from disabled all the way, as you can see there, down to closed, and then a percentage from 5 up to 95% in 5% increments. Have a timeout timer. I always set that to 1 minute, 180 seconds, so that forces me not to talk too much, as I am known to do.
Defaults to 60.
And then I have it set out with a timeout timer rekey delay. So if I do hit that 180 seconds, I'm forced to wait 3 seconds after I've timed out before it'll allow me to rekey the radio. This one's also not mandatory. That one I set as a, let's be polite, you've been holding the frequency. The scan list there, that covers back, I've got to move my zoom information again because it's in the way. Zone scan list, sorry, is the scan list that, almost off screen there, I'm not sure if I minimise that. So that applies to your, the scan list there. This is the key one here, talk group list, refers back over to the talk group list here, and I've set in 2 talk group lists here, DMR Plus, which is the VK DMR network, and Brandmeister. DMR Plus is obviously for this one, and again that comes back to having all those preset talk groups in it. I think it was 24 or thereabouts, and that's what makes the left and right arrow buttons selectable on the talk group available, that is pre-programmed to do it that way. One part I haven't actually covered about the open firmware yet is if you hit the hash key on the radio, you can actually direct input a talk group number. It can be absolutely anything, providing it's a valid talk group to where you want to talk to. And so let's just say you wanted, you're on, say, talk group 3807, and you wanted to go directly to I don't know, talk group 13, but you didn't want to hit the left arrow or right arrow to get back down to that. You could simply punch in hash 13 and then hit the green button. It's like a telephone, I think it's got on it. No, it's the green button within button. You click on that and it would immediately go directly to that talk group 13, and so you can direct input as well as have them preset. As I said, I've set this code plug up with presets so that you don't have to know all the talk groups off the top of your head, but going forward, if you were to modify your own, you can certainly do whatever you want. You can preset a contact for a given channel, like for example with the zone list of DMR. If we had VK7RAD, for example, I think I have that, so let's just go and have a look. No, that's scan, wrong one. Did I click on that? Let's try it again. So we've got RAD, and I've got to move my zoom window out of the way. We've got that to fire up by default on 505, which is the nationwide talk group for Australia. So that can be overridden too, I believe. I think that's channel level. Yeah, that's right. You could double click on zones and it brings up this is when it powers on. So for example, we'd have the upper frequency would be in the DMR zone on RAD, and the lower frequency, which is accessible via the orange button. It'll only display one lot of frequencies at a time on the screen, but you do actually essentially have 2. And it will do that, and you can override these ones by whatever you want them to be, whether you want it to be on FM by default or DMR by default, whichever one. At the moment I've set it up for the with both the domain repeaters, the digital domain and FM 2 meters on 7RAD. How are we going for time? Okay. So look, that rushes through the code, the CPS really, really quickly, and I know there's probably going to be a plethora of questions. And don't worry, I am here to answer them as best I can. The main important one is, of course, is getting that firmware loaded. Once you get the Open GD77 firmware loaded, that's when the use of your GD77 will become a lot easier. And as I say, this code plug will be made available as soon as I give Justin a copy of it. And that way you'll actually be able to load this particular code plug into your radio, and all you'll have to do is just change your DMR ID and you'll be on the air ready to go. The only other thing I was going to cover, which probably you can, the GD77 has the ability to store an amount of, my mouse goes over to here, there's two storage areas in the GD77 where you can store contact details. You've got the contact list itself, which is here, but you've also got an extra memory area that's not user available to edit within the CPS. And this is where you can actually drag down what have I gone into there? That's not what we're after. Let's just get out of that one. We want DMR ID, that's the one we wanted. And so for example here, this is where you can, by default it's set to interrogate region 505, which is Australia, and an inactivity number of days of a year. And we could click on this one here where it says download from Ham Digital, and this will go and grab a list of call signs. What have we got? 1,233 call signs of just VK call signs only that have been active in the last 365 days. And you could dump that amount of call signs into this non-user accessible memory area, so that if and when their DMR number comes up, instead of it displaying just a number, it'll display their call sign. Now you can also extend the inactive days out to, well, I've done as far as 9,999, and that hasn't been claimed. Well, let's just do that as an example. I'll just clear that.
There's someone out.
So 9999, and we'll click on download, and I think it'll give about 1,600 call signs. There we go, 1,684, and that would be all the VK amateurs on DMR that have keyed up through the system in the last 9,999 days. And that way, as I say, if their number comes up on the system, it'll display on your radio as their call sign instead of just a number. And to write that to the, once you've got that list, you just click on the write to radio and it will automatically go and do that. Another thing I discovered just the other day when I was experimenting with this, so for example, I've got 505 here and we've got a list that's been generated. If I wanted to add New Zealand call signs, I can just go into here and put in 530 and re-download on the download button, and now we have a total of 2,040 in the list. If we come down to the end of the list here, we've now got some ZL call signs. Now all countries have a DMR prefix. For Australia it's 505, for New Zealand it's 530. And providing you know the country that you're particularly interested in, you can just add further call signs. It will tell you up the top here that it can store 1,300 and 796 call signs in this section of RAM that's not accessible via the CPS other than just through this menu. So that's a way that you can store people's details. Well, all it stores actually is the call sign and the actual ID number. It doesn't keep the name, I don't believe, or it doesn't display the name, it only displays the call sign. So that's a handy little feature especially if you don't want you don't want a number just displaying on your screen. You'd prefer to have a call sign. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes it's, if you're like me, you can never remember who you're talking to half the time, so it's handy. Now with that, let's clear out of that. The other part where it says here download contacts, it's a very similar window that comes up, but this, if you do anything in this box and download, it will apply it to the contacts here in this I'm not going to do it while there. So anyway, it'll apply it to the contacts in this list here. So where I have digital contacts, and you've got that list there, I've only got a small list of talk groups there. It will just apply the personal details in a contact, and the difference is it won't have a group call icon here, it'll have a private call instead. So that's about that. Now I know that was an absolute plethora of information to try and suck in short time, but that's about where that's at. I don't think I've got a URL. I've got two URLs actually, Justin, that I'll need to forward on to you for after the fact details, and that is the GitHub address, and also one for the Open GD77 forum, and that's the only two URLs, and I think that's pretty much me.
That's great, Scott. That's
Okay.
that's excellent.
I'll just put my video back on if I can find what I'm doing. What am I doing? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and start video. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Okay.
We might need some assistance from Hayden there.
Yeah. There we go. Here I am. So, that was that.
No, that's fantastic, Scott. The video will certainly be available on a number of forums if people want to go back over it. Take questions from our viewers, watchers at this point on.
I don't know how that's going to come up, if it will at all.
No, absolutely bright. Yeah, no.
That's all right.
The camera's overwhelmed by the backlight.
Yep.
So, any questions from our people who are on the Zoom session? Please go ahead one at a time. I don't know quite how that's going to work, but anyway.
My video update is not updating quick enough on my screen.
Talk group 505.
I have a question. Yes, I gather this doesn't work for the MD380.
No, correct. I can actually answer that.
Sorry, I didn't get the audio on that. It was just all jitter.
Go again, Steve.
Yeah, sorry, Scott. The MD380 was not on the list of radios. I gather that's because it doesn't work with that one.
That's affirmative. This is for the GD77, the GD77S. And this, I'm just going back from memory of what was. I'll just have to bring up the screen quickly under the firmware later. What is it? The GD77, GD77S, the Baofeng DM1801, or the Baofeng RD5R. The MD380 has its own extra special tools which cover more than what the GD77 is capable of at the moment anyway. It's called MD380 tools. That's with an S, not a Z. And that'll, I could fix up with that at a later date too if need be.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions.
Go, Paul.
Go for it.
I want to dwell on the route. How much
much does the code plug that you've just described to us differ from the code plug, say, that I got from Clayton on the, where am I? No, it's 24th of Jan, I think, this year.
Tremendously different. In that I don't think the code plug that I've created here would even load on the Open GD77 firmware of that era.
Not true.
Because a lot of development has happened in that time period.
Okay, so the process is a bit different for me already having an existing code plug.
Well, if you download the CPS, as I described at the beginning there, you can update your firmware within the CPS.
Right.
Whereas before, you used to have to do it on a separate bit of software to actually mess around loading the firmware.
Can I butt in, Scott?
Go for it.
He's already got the latest code plug for that one in January. He's already got the Open GD77 software in, so he's actually got the new format in the code plug.
Oh, okay.
So he's already up to this level. I did that earlier in January for him, but the difference the code plug he's got, I've got the whole Australia channels in it, so he'd have more zones in it with all the, like, not just a Hobart one.
Yeah, so no wonder I'm really confused.
That's why I butt in.
And I suppose the next thing, and it really is a very noob question, and I think maybe I'm doing some people who come onto this fresh a bit of a service because everybody's a bit shy to ask it. But I've got it on here, and that's great. But still, even every time we have our DMR discussions, we end up talking about the fundamentals of DMR, what it is, etc. But I'm still sitting here with a radio, and I'm going, what? It's top group this, and flapdoodle that, and wiki whack this, and I'm going, okay, well, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I turned it on today, and I set it back down. So maybe a link that would kind of describe, like, for example, I know there's private talk groups you can have. There's public talk groups. I heard somebody talk about the Reast talk group. Is it 3804, 3807? And then you mentioned a talk group of 505 Australia wide. I mean, I'm sorry, it's double Dutch, and it's one of those things where you sit down to dig into it and you go, oh, well, I'd rather have a bourbon.
Can I butt in here?
Yeah.
There is a wonderful I'll put a rider on this. It doesn't go into the detail which is specifically Australian, but it does go into a fair bit of detail around DMR. There is a website called DMR for Dummies, and it's written like the books, and it gives you that at least that DMR background. Then the code plugs that Scott and Clayton put together.
Well, that's over here.
Yeah, but the code plugs that Scott and Clayton put together then give you, I suppose, the code plugs that you would normally be using, and it's a matter of starting to use those talk groups that are in those code plugs and finding out, okay, this is for Victoria, this is for Tasmania, this is for Australia, etc. So, but just from the fundamentals of DMR, I found the DMR for Dummies a great introduction to DMR, and then the VK DMR site, which Scott mentioned, is another great resource, because that then gives you the Australian flavour. So what I suggest we do, Scott, is include those URLs.
I'm just going to post them into the chat on
cool.
Zoom.
Okay.
I've just got to load up my browser to reclaim them from earlier.
Great, thank you. I will remute.
As soon as you get the CPS thingy, you'll be able to install it. As I said, it might throw a false positive on you on any virus protection.
Yep.
Put the server in too, Scott, so you can probably help him understand when he talks on talk group which group footage he turns on and things like that would be handy for him as well.
It's not to current knowledge of that.
Yeah, well, I need some newbie help as well, so I've got a couple of things to mention.
Okay. Go, Larry.
Yeah,
Should I?
Trying to ask you questions. I'm just trying to get the screen on in front of me here so I can paste into the chat. You're right, Larry. You go.
Yeah, go, Larry.
I can do two things at once, apparently.
This is for Paul and I, who are sort of, well, I'm admitting to being new at DMR. I had this for a while because I was very enthusiastic, and I responded to Clayton's super salesman job a while ago and bought myself one of these, and it's all good. In a nutshell, it was impossible to use. It was just too crazy. I mean, I was so unhappy with it and myself, I didn't even use it on FM, regular FM. I tried doing this a little while ago, as in 2 weeks ago, and it was still really complicated. And Scott was really, really helpful. And in a nutshell, what happened the other day, it was a very simple, very fast process. I got a hold of and he was here to help me do this, but it's all straightforward stuff. And there's a lot that you were shown and I was shown that I've forgotten already, but that's another story. You need to have the Open GD77 CPS installer, and you need a code plug. And apparently the new installer, I was using the old one, required that you went out and got the firmware, but the new one just goes out and gets it automatically. So that was like a real, whoa, this is cool. So set up the machine, this thing to update itself. There's instructions about, pushing 75 buttons and singing, something. And then you can get it into ready to be a program mode. Then you need the GPS installer, the CPS installer, and tell it to go out and get the firmware, and basically that's it. When it's all done, a little green thing goes on, and like as Scott described. The choice of code plug is an interesting thing. The one that I requested from Scott is dead flat simple. It has those three things in it that you saw, which was DMR, 2-meter FM, and 70-centimeter FM, whereas the one that Clayton makes is one I hopefully will graduate to someday, which has lots and lots and lots of stuff in it. So, as Scott said, you choose DMR, or you choose 2-meter FM or 70-centimeter FM, and you have a choice of the repeaters or whatever you want to go on. It's really quite easy. You go up and down between RCR and RAD and whatever, and you go sideways to get the talk group. So it's not really complicated anymore. What I need is what Paul mentioned, and that is I need to know that 505 is only going to connect me to something, and 3807 is going to connect me just to the local guys and whatever. So that's the part I don't know. I have no idea where I'm going when I plug in a talk group. So I need a little menu for talk groups. Otherwise, I tried this little radio outside. I was able to get into the RAD DMR repeater easily, and Scott and I were trying to work out some things. It turns out if the signal's too strong, it won't work either. So it's about interesting things to learn about DMR. But I want to officially say thanks to Scott and thanks to Clayton for introducing this new technology, because it's really very cool.
You're welcome.
There you go.
Cool. Any further?
For those that are on Zoom, I should have put some spacing between all that, but there's two URLs. One is a GitHub URL, which is where you get the current CPS from, and just remember where it's got the top listing. Towards the bottom of that top listing, there'll be a little expandable area called Assets, and that's where the executable will be downloadable from. The next one is the forum for Open GD77. Now, if you're into forums, that's great. If you're not into forums, don't worry about it, but that's where some more information and or confusion can be obtained. And I've also posted a copy of the code plug that was used in the thingo tonight. So I don't know how Zoom deals with files being attached. It said that I could do it, but whether or not they're retrievable from the other end, I have no idea. But I'll email you a copy of it, Justin, and with those links as well, so that any further notes that are going to be put after the fact can be put in, etc.
Cool. Thanks, Scott. That's great. We can certainly put them somewhere along with the other bits and pieces, and make sure people get access to them. So thank you. Any further questions for Scott on the Zoom watches?
Just a quick mention. sorry, someone else. I'm here, Nika. I'm just going to might help with them trying to understand what channels they're on. Easiest way to do is just think of your VK7 call sign. Like talk group 3807 is Tasmania, and 8 is Darwin, Northern Territory, and so forth. So you might actually find that handy to go that way.
Are there any questions on DMR?
So that might actually help answer a few questions to people.
For Scott.
I haven't got a camera or anything.
I think there's questions or answers coming in via
Thank you.
at the moment.
Really is multimedia.
Definitely. Thanks, Herman. That's good feedback for Scott. Great pictures, great presentation from VK7HW. We've got multiple digital delays. So, any further questions for Scott via 3807? This is VK7HSE.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to come in.
Go for it, Warren.
Yeah, well, I certainly would join the club with Paul and Larry about being a newbie. I've had my GD77 since that great sale that Clayton organized, and I've used it a little bit. Been lucky enough to find the channels when the Sunday morning broadcast has been happening, and been able to do a call back to Clayton. But yes, I have struggled in trying to understand many of the basic features of it, and so certainly would be interested in that DMR for dummies. At the same time, I think where I did gain some understanding of digital radio was when I spent a week in Queensland as a volunteer firefighter, and the radios up there are DMR that work over the mobile phone network. And that gave me a bit of insight on what the usage is like, what the audio is like, and the communication style you need to use. So yeah, I'm quite keen to keep going with the DMR radio. So I'm looking forward to exploring the DMR a lot more. And but still, I have to say I'm a newbie at it. So yeah, I'm with you there, Larry and Paul. So yeah, we'll see how we get into it. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Excellent presentation.
Thanks, Warren. One of the things I think actually came up in the Reast committee meeting last night was to do with coming up with an FAQ. I think it was actually Larry who put the idea in, an FAQ or something of that sort on DMR, and what I'm hearing is at least the an FAQ on the VK talk groups would be helpful. So we'll certainly get that happening, well and truly. So
I'm just trying to pull up on my screen the VK DMR website. It looks like I'm fighting with some people streaming on Netflix. But that actually already has a list of what the VK-DMR talk groups are,
cool.
All the numbers that are available and what they're configured for. My external, for whatever reason, is being denied by either myself or somebody else out in the other room. So it's the VKDMR.com is the
and
that I'm trying to pull up at the moment.
Yeah, that's all right, Scott. We'll put that in the links list. But a great site, and can I just say, if you delve into the wonders of hotspots, which we're not going to go into tonight. Don't worry, Scott. I'm not going to drop you into it with a hotspot. But if you go into configuring hotspots, the dashboards that are available on the VK-DMR website are invaluable, to actually work out what's going on. Scott, I have a question for you and Clayton, which is about colour codes. Oh, Scott. Yeah, no, Scott's. We've just gone to sharing a screen. Oh, there we go. There's the VK DMR website. Love it. Thanks,
Right,
Scott.
so on that, you've got the headings there. They should all be pretty self-explanatory, but I believe it's under this using, and I hope this works because I've just clicked on it now. Under using DMR, it should have a list of the talk groups under that heading, I believe.
Yeah. Yep.
But if it doesn't work, that's okay. Just kill my video because it's gone. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
No, well, it's an excellent website. It's good and it's current, and it's simple. It doesn't have a sort of a huge amount of information that you've sort of got to wade through. It's just quite simply presented, so it's really good, worth a look. My question is colour codes. I keep seeing them in the configuration tools, and everyone just says, "Oh, I'll set it to this." What are they, and what are they useful? Can we use them for things?
You want to take that, Scott, or you want me to?
Codes are essentially what CCCSS tones are to FM. So in the case of DMR, there are 15.
You just dropped out there, Scott. I don't know whether you can hear me. Do you want to take it, Clayton?
Yeah, I can take it. This is 16. So we're going to double, I think. Yeah. What happens in different countries? They use different colour codes. That's why there's different colours. Basically, Australians are all colour code 1, but in places like the UK and that, they use different colour codes, and there's actually 16 different colour codes that are used different around the world. So that then the colour code is basically, it's another format of like a talk group basically, and it won't work if you're on the wrong colour code in what country. That's why they were actually in there.
Okay. All right. Okay. Cool. Any other questions for Scott and Clayton? No. I'll just put out a call on R2. This is VK7HSE. Just putting a shout out to anyone who'd like to ask Scott or Clayton a question around DMR for our presentation tonight. Over. And VK7VH, VK7OTC. Go ahead, Vince.
Thank you, Justin. It's VK7 Victor Hotel, Vince, and good presentation tonight. Thank you for that. And I suppose as a follow-up to not what's called the Department of Main Roads, a follow-up to DMR, maybe Clayton would do a follow-up on D-Star. So that's maybe something for the future. But I was very interested in tonight. Great information. Thank you so much indeed, Scott.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vince. And I saw a little smile from Clayton there when you mentioned D-Star. So that might be our next whole of club virtual presentation. I think that's a great idea. Any further comments from via R2 on tonight's presentation? Please go ahead. VK7 OTC clear. So that's
VK7VH. I forgot to mention, Justin. I always watch this via the true stuff. RF. Over.
Roger, Vince. No problems at all. Well, that's good. Yes, we're going out on RF and we're going out on the Reast streaming channel, and we're also being recorded. And we'll also be going out on Ham Radio DX channel in a short while. I think is that right, Hayden? Over.
No, it's live now.
Oh, there you go. It's live now on HR. Sorry, I've been dealing with HR all day.
HRDX.
Ham radio digs.
Am I back?
You are.
Oh, good. Yeah, my notebook crapped out.
Okay, no, well that's good. That's excellent. Cool.
Now I'm on the reliable phone.
Very good. So, any last questions for Scott or Clayton before we close off for tonight? No, I'm not hearing it.
The recording has stopped.
The recording stopped. So thank you. The nice lady tells me the recording stopped. Yes.
Is it possible for Clayton and Scott to provide the URLs for those websites that show activity? Because it was really good when testing my radio to be able to see my call sign pop up.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely, Larry.
I don't know where that was, but it was popping up.
No. Well, that was on the VK DMR website. So you've got links to those activity pages. So we'll put them in the link list. Well and truly. So good stuff. So thank you very much to Scott and also Clayton there for giving us that presentation, which will be available on the various channels. So if you need to go back and refer to something, it'll be there for you to be able to do that. So yeah, it's and thank you for coming along to our second of our whole of club virtual presentations. If there is any feedback, please send it through to reast@reast.asn.au. And we'll build it into the next presentation. By the sound of it, we might have the next presentation sorted out with D-Star. So we'll lock that in for next month. Yeah, and so thank you for everyone involved, and hope you've got something from tonight's presentation, and look forward to the others. I'll just do a bit of a plug for the rest of the Wednesday nights. We have the DATV Experimenters nights, and we've got the Working from the Shack series, which we're going through. So there'll be another one of them next Wednesday night. And then you've also got in that email that went out to members the Zoom meeting details for the Wednesday afternoon group as well. So they can meet virtually on from just before noon through until 3 o'clock, I think it is, something like that. Is that right, Larry?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Okay, thank you, Ron. So yeah, that's there are some options available to you. There. But if any of you come up with any other ideas that you would like to see put into action, please send it through on that Reast email address, and we'll certainly try to make it happen. So yeah.
I've just posted those URLs for the hotspot and repeater list for the VKDMR dashboards.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. And they are worth their weight in gold. Sorry?
And I'll shoot all those links to you in an email in just a few minutes.
Great. That's great. Thank you, Scott. All right. We'll close off the meeting at that. Thank you to everyone. And thank you again to Hayden and UTAS for providing this wonderful service. It's fantastic. So we'll catch you next time round. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you virtually next time. 73.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Night all. Yeah, thanks all. Just a comment.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Just a comment, Justin.
Yes.
On ATV, Richard was on your right, and on Zoom, your left was your reversed. I don't know whether you knew that or not.
I love it. Well, see the background.
I was going to say the banner behind you is all reversed as well.
No, well, the banner on ATV I had to reverse to get it right for ATV. So it's fascinating. So yeah, it's correct on ATV, but it'll be reversed for everybody else. So
actually, it's in Cyrillic.
Right. Okay. I love it.
And thanks, Scott. I'm more confused than I was before, but I'll get around. Good day, Larry.
Take care, guys.
Fantastic. Oh well, thanks, guys. Cheers.